poor girl never spoke for 20 years. But a billionaire heard her voice clear as day. A silent young woman who hasn't spoken since she was 6 years old thinks her whole life will pass without anyone ever hearing her voice again. But one stormy night, inside a quiet bookstore, a billionaire hears something impossible, a whisper coming from her lips, clear as day, words she should never have known. Shaken, he tries to help her, but the moment she starts to remember the truth, something terrifying awakens. Shadows follow her. A man with a black umbrella keeps appearing. And the secret behind her silence is darker and closer than anyone realizes. Now her voice may be the only thing that can save her. But can she speak in time? Before the past comes back to finish what it started? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The November wind howled through Boston's narrow streets, driving sheets of icy rain against the weathered brick facade of Vale's Books. Inside the cozy shop, warm light spilled from antique brass lamps, casting a gentle glow over rows of well-loved books. Anna Brooks moved methodically between the shelves, her delicate fingers trailing along worn spines as she completed her evening tasks. At 26, Anna carried herself with a quiet grace that seemed to absorb the peaceful atmosphere of the bookstore. Her dark curls were pulled back in a neat bun, and her movements were precise and careful, like someone who had learned to navigate the world without making a sound. For 3 years, she had found sanctuary among these books, in this place where silence was natural and welcome. Thunder cracked overhead, causing the building's old bones to shudder. Anna's hands trembled as she slid the last novel into place, her breath catching slightly. The storm's violence stirred memories she fought daily to keep buried, memories of another night when thunder had masked different, more terrible sounds. From the creaking staircase came familiar footsteps. Damien Vale descended from his private office, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the wooden floorboards. At 42, he carried himself with the gentle authority of someone used to success, but humbled by loss. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his eyes held a kindness that had drawn Anna to apply for this position 3 years ago. "Let's close early tonight," he said softly, noting how Anna's shoulders tensed with each thunderclap. "The weather's only getting worse." Anna nodded, grateful for his understanding. She had never needed words to communicate with Damien. Over the years, he had learned to read her expressions, her gestures, the slight changes in her posture that spoke volumes. He knew that storms were particularly difficult for her, though he didn't know why. Like everyone else, he respected her silence without demanding its "oh-I" story. Damien moved toward the front of the store, keys jingling softly in his hand. The lights flickered once, twice, making the shadows dance across the shelves. Anna stood in the poetry section, running her finger along the spines of leather-bound collections, finding comfort in their familiar texture. Then, something extraordinary happened. A whisper, soft as a turning page, floated through the air. And in the end, we find that love speaks loudest in the spaces between words. Damien stopped dead in his tracks. The keys slipped from his fingers, landing with a muted thud on the carpeted floor. That line, those exact words, lay hidden in his private manuscript, the one locked away in his office desk drawer, the novel he hadn't shown to anyone, not his agent, not his editor, not a single soul. His heart hammered against his ribs as he turned slowly toward the poetry aisle. The lights flickered again, longer this time, and in that moment of semi-darkness, he saw Anna. She stood rigid, one hand pressed against the bookshelf, her eyes wide and unfocused. Her lips were slightly parted, as if in surprise at her own voice. It was impossible. In 3 years, he had never heard her speak a single word. Yet there was no one else in the store, no other explanation for that whispered line. Before he could process what had happened, Anna's knees buckled. Her body swayed, and then she was falling, books tumbling from the shelf as she collapsed against it. "Anna!" Damien rushed forward, catching her before she hit the floor. Her skin was cold to the touch, her breathing shallow. "Help!" he called out instinctively, though he knew his evening staff had already left. "Anna, can you hear me?" Thunder boomed overhead, so loud it seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Rain pounded against the windows with renewed fury, and the lights flickered one final time before plunging the store into darkness. Damien held Anna's unconscious form, his mind racing with questions. How had she known those words? What had just happened? And most importantly, was she all right? In the darkness, cradling his silent employee, Damien Vale realized that everything he thought he knew about Anna Brooks had just changed. The storm raged outside, but inside Vale's books, in that moment of impossible revelation, a different kind of storm was just beginning. Anna's body felt fragile in his arms, but her presence suddenly seemed immense, filled with mystery. Her face, barely visible in the dim emergency lights that cast a weak glow through the store, was peaceful despite what had just occurred. It was the face of someone who had just done something extraordinary without meaning to, like a sleepwalker who had accidentally revealed a long-held secret. Damien shifted her weight carefully, reaching for his phone in his pocket. The screen's blue light illuminated their small corner of the store, casting strange shadows among the tumbled books. He needed to call for help, but something made him hesitate. What had just happened felt private, almost sacred, like a trust he needed to protect. The rain continued its assault on the windows, creating a constant backdrop of white noise that seemed to isolate them from the outside world. In this bubble of shadow and storm, Damien found himself wondering about all the things he didn't know about Anna Brooks. For 3 years, she had moved through his store like a gentle ghost, efficient and observant, her silence accepted as simply part of who she was. But now, with those impossible words still echoing in his mind, he realized that her silence might not be simple at all. It might be protecting something, or hiding something. The line she had spoken wasn't just any line from his manuscript. It was the very last one, the culmination of everything he had been trying to say about loss and healing and the power of unspoken things. Anna stirred slightly in his arms, her eyelids fluttering. Damien watched her face intently, wondering if she would remember what had happened, if she would be able, or willing, to explain. But when her eyes opened, they held only confusion, and then, as awareness returned, fear. She tried to sit up quickly, but Damien kept his hold gentle but firm. "Easy," he said softly. "You fainted. Take a moment." Anna's eyes darted around the darkened store, taking in their position on the floor, the scattered books, the rain-lashed windows. Her breathing quickened, and Damien could feel her beginning to tremble again. "You're safe," he assured her, his voice calm and steady. "The storm knocked out the power, but the emergency lights are on. Do you remember what happened?" Anna's face changed subtly, a flicker of something like recognition, quickly hidden behind her usual careful mask. She shook her head slowly, but Damien caught the uncertainty in the gesture. She remembered something, but whatever it was, she wasn't ready to acknowledge it. Carefully, he helped her sit up, making sure she was stable before loosening his support. Anna drew her knees up to her chest, making herself small, a defensive posture he had noticed she often took when feeling vulnerable. Around them, the scattered books lay like fallen soldiers, their spines gleaming dully in the emergency lighting. Damien wanted to ask about the line she had spoken, wanted to understand how she could possibly know words he had written in complete solitude. But looking at her now, huddled and frightened, he knew this wasn't the moment. Whatever had happened, whatever it meant, it would have to wait. Instead, he began gathering the fallen books, giving Anna space to collect herself. Each volume he picked up seemed to whisper with possibility, as if the entire store had been transformed by what had just occurred. The poetry section, once just another quiet corner of his shop, now felt charged with potential, like the air before lightning strikes. Anna's hands eventually joined his in collecting the books, her movements, still careful but less shaky now. Their fingers brushed occasionally as they worked, and each time Damien felt a jolt of awareness. Not romantic or inappropriate, but a recognition that the person beside him contained depths he had never imagined. The storm continued its assault outside, but its power seemed diminished now, overshadowed by the mystery that had unfolded within these walls. As they replaced the last book on the shelf, Damien knew that everything had changed. His quiet bookstore, his silent employee, his carefully ordered world, none of it would ever be quite the same again. Anna stood slowly, steadying herself against the shelf. Her eyes met his for a brief moment, and in them, Damien saw something he had never noticed before, not just fear or trauma, but a deep, knowing intelligence. She had secrets, this quiet young woman who had worked so diligently in his store. And somehow, impossibly, one of those secrets involved words he had written but never shared. The emergency lights cast long shadows across the floor as they made their way to the front of the store. The storm had settled into a steady drumbeat of rain, less dramatic, but no less persistent. Damien knew he should say something, should at least ask if she needed medical attention or a ride home. But the moment felt too fragile for ordinary concerns. Instead, he watched as Anna gathered her things, her movements measured and precise as always. She paused at the door, turning back to look at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then she slipped out into the rain, leaving Damien alone with his questions and the lingering echo of words that should have been impossible for her to know. The rain drummed steadily against the windows as Damien carefully lifted Anna's unconscious form. Her slight frame felt fragile in his arms, reminding him of a wounded bird. Moving with deliberate care through the dimly lit store, he carried her toward the small employee break room at the back. Thunder rumbled overhead, but its fury had lessened, settling into the steady rhythm of a late autumn storm. The emergency lights cast a soft glow through the narrow hallway as Damien shouldered open the break room door. Inside, a worn but comfortable couch sat against one wall, its faded blue fabric showing years of use during lunch breaks and quiet moments between shifts. Gently, he laid Anna on the couch, immediately checking her pulse. The steady thrum beneath his fingers reassured him, though her face remained pale in the dim light. He reached for the fleece blanket they kept stored in the cabinet, a practical addition for Boston's brutal winters, and draped it over her still form. "Anna," he called softly, not expecting a response but needing to try. Her eyelids fluttered slightly, but she remained unconscious. Damien pulled up a chair and settled in to wait, his mind racing with questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. The words she had whispered, the exact final line of his manuscript, echoed in his thoughts. He had written those words alone in his office at 3 o'clock in the morning, driven by grief and memory. No one else had seen them. No one could have known. Minutes ticked by slowly. The storm's intensity continued to fade, leaving behind a steady rainfall that painted shifting shadows on the break room walls. Damien watched Anna's face, noting how even in unconsciousness a slight furrow remained between her brows, as if she carried her burdens even in sleep. Finally her eyes began to flutter open, Confusion clouded her expression as she took in her surroundings, followed quickly by a flash of fear when she realized she wasn't alone. Damien stayed perfectly still, keeping his voice soft and calm. "You're safe," he assured her. "You're in the break room. You fainted in the poetry section. Are you in any pain?" Anna's eyes darted around the room, her breathing quick and shallow. Slowly, she shook her head in response to his question. Her hand moved to the small notepad she always kept in her pocket, her primary means of communication since she had started working at the store 3 years ago. With trembling fingers, she wrote, "Blacked out?" "Yes," Damien confirmed. "You were shelving books when it happened. Do you remember anything before that?" Anna's hand hesitated over the notepad. The pencil shook slightly as she wrote, "Not clearly." Damien took a deep breath, knowing he needed to ask, but uncertain how to approach it. "Anna," he began carefully, "before you fainted, you spoke." Her eyes widened, genuine surprise, and something like fear flickering across her face. The pencil scratched across the paper. "Impossible." "You whispered something, a very specific line." He paused, watching her reaction. "It was the final line from my new manuscript, a manuscript no one has read." Anna's face had gone even paler. Her hand shook so badly now that her next words were barely legible. "I don't know." The fear in her eyes made Damien's heart ache. Whatever had happened, whatever explanation there might be, it clearly terrified her. He thought of all the times he had watched her work quietly in the store, efficiently shelving books, helping customers with written notes, always keeping to herself, but somehow radiating a gentle kindness that drew people to her. "It's all right," he said softly. "We don't have to figure it out right now. The important thing is that you're okay." Relief flooded her face, and some of the tension left her shoulders. She wrote, "Thank you." "Can you stand?" he asked. "I think we should get you home." Anna nodded, slowly pushing herself up to sitting position. The blanket fell away as she tested her legs, looking unsteady but determined. Damien kept a careful distance, ready to help if needed, but respecting her space. "Let me walk you to your bus stop," he offered. "I have an umbrella." She hesitated, then wrote, "You don't have to." "I insist," he replied firmly. "It's still raining, and I'd feel better knowing you got there safely." After a moment, she nodded her acceptance. They made their way upstairs and out of the store, Damien locking up behind them. The rain fell in a silver curtain around them as they walked to the bus stop, sharing the large black umbrella he kept in his office. The street was quiet, most people having sought shelter from the storm. Puddles reflected the glow of street lamps, creating islands of light in the gathering dusk. They stood in companionable silence under the bus shelter, watching the rain create patterns on the pavement. When the number 47 bus appeared through the rain-blurred darkness, Anna turned to Damien and gave him a small, grateful smile. She scribbled one last note. "Thank you for being kind." He watched as she boarded the bus, her slight figure disappearing into its brightly lit interior. Even after the bus pulled away, its taillights bleeding red into the rain, Damien remained standing at the stop, lost in thought. The whispered words played again in his mind. And in the end, it was not the words spoken that changed everything, but the silence between them that held all the truth. His own words, written in solitude, somehow known to this quiet young woman who had worked in his store for 3 years. The rain continued to fall, soaking into his shoes despite the umbrella. But Damien barely noticed, too caught up in replaying the impossible moment in the poetry aisle. Something extraordinary had happened in his bookstore tonight, something that defied explanation. Whether it was miraculous or disturbing, he couldn't yet say. But as he stood there in the gathering darkness, he knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be quite the same. The early morning light filtered weakly through the bookstore's front windows, casting long shadows across the empty aisles. Anna's footsteps echoed in the quiet space as she moved between the display tables, methodically adjusting books that had been jostled out of place the day before. Her fingers traced the spines gently, finding comfort in their familiar texture. She had arrived 30 minutes before the store's official opening time, hoping to avoid any questions about last night's incident. The memory of collapsing in the poetry aisle made her cheeks burn with embarrassment, though the details remained frustratingly fuzzy. The bell above the door chimed softly. Anna's shoulders tensed until she recognized Damien's familiar footsteps. She turned to find him holding 2 paper cups of coffee, steam rising in delicate wisps. "Good morning," he said warmly, extending one of the cups toward her. "I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, so I got it with just a little cream." Anna accepted the cup with both hands, letting its warmth seep into her cold fingers. She pulled out her notepad and wrote, "Thank you. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Damien replied, taking a sip from his own cup. He seemed to be choosing his next words carefully. "Anna, I hope you won't mind, but I've made a call this morning. There's someone I'd like you to meet, if you're willing." Anna's hand tightened slightly around her cup, but she kept her expression neutral as she waited for him to continue. "Her name is Dr. Mara Ellington," Damien explained. "She's a specialist who works with adults experiencing selective mutism and trauma recovery. She's very well respected in her field, and more importantly, she's someone I trust completely." He hurried to add, "There's absolutely no pressure. This isn't a condition of your employment or anything like that. I want you to have access to help if you want it." Anna stared down at her coffee for a long moment. Her free hand moved to her notepad, hesitated, then began to write. "Why are you doing this?" Damien's expression softened. "Because everyone deserves to feel safe and heard, even if they can't speak above a whisper." Anna's eyes met his briefly before dropping back to her notepad. She wrote slowly. "Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll think about meeting her. That's all I ask." Damien said with a gentle smile, "Take whatever time you need to decide." The rest of the morning passed in its usual routine as other employees arrived and customers began filtering in. Anna moved through her tasks efficiently, reshelving returned books and helping customers find what they needed with her written notes. But she could feel Damien's occasional glances from his office window above the main floor. Upstairs, Damien sat at his desk, his laptop open to the manuscript he was supposed to be working on. Instead, he found himself reading and rereading the final chapter, particularly the last line that Anna had somehow known. The words seemed to mock him from the screen. And in the end, it was not the word spoken that changed everything, but the silence between them that held all the truth. How had she known? The question circled his mind like a persistent echo. He had written those words alone in his office at 3 a.m, and the file had never left his personal computer. The rational part of his mind insisted there had to be a logical explanation, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had occurred in that moment before Anna collapsed. As evening approached and the store began to empty, Damien made his way downstairs. He found Anna organizing the new arrivals section, her movements precise and practiced. "Anna," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. "Could you come up to my office for a moment? There's something else I'd like to discuss with you." She followed him up the narrow staircase to his office, a warm space filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable leather chairs. Damien gestured for her to sit while he leaned against his desk. "I've been thinking about your schedule," he began. "Would you be interested in increasing your hours? We could use the extra help, especially in the evenings." Anna nodded, writing, I would like that. There's something else, Damien continued. The studio apartment above the store. It's been empty since Mrs. Chen moved to Florida last month. It's fully furnished, and, well, I thought you might like to consider taking it. The rent would be reasonable, and it would mean no more late-night bus rides. Anna's eyes widened in surprise. She wrote quickly, That's very generous, but why? It makes good business sense to have someone living above the store, Damien said, though they both knew there was more to it than that. And honestly, I'd feel better knowing you're safe, especially after last night. Anna studied her notepad for a long moment before writing. I'll think about it tonight. Of course, Damien replied. Take all the time you need. The sun had nearly set by the time Anna left the store, pulling her coat tight against the cold wind. The streets were quieter than usual, most people already home for dinner. Her boots clicked against the sidewalk as she walked toward her bus stop, her mind full of Damien's offers. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice the man in the black coat until she was passing him. Something about the way he stood perfectly still, staring at her, made her skin prickle with unease. She quickened her pace, resisting the urge to look back over her shoulder. The sound of her own footsteps seemed too loud in the growing darkness, and she didn't slow down until she reached the relative safety of the busy intersection where her bus stop waited. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the bookstore windows as Anna handed Damien her carefully written note. Her hand trembled slightly as she watched him read her acceptance of both the additional hours and the therapy session. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed her sleepless night, spent weighing these decisions. Thank you for trusting me with this, Damien said softly, folding the note with careful hands. Dr. Ellington is expecting us at 3 o'clock. Would you like me to drive you there? Anna nodded, relief flooding her features at not having to make the journey alone. The drive to the clinic was quiet, with only the soft hum of classical music from the car's speakers filling the space between them. Damien's Tesla glided smoothly through Boston's afternoon traffic, while Anna watched the city blur past her window. The clinic occupied a converted Victorian house in a peaceful neighborhood, its walls painted a calming sage green. Inside, the waiting room felt almost like someone's living room, with comfortable armchairs and soft lighting. A small water feature trickled quietly in one corner. I'll be right here if you need anything, Damien assured her, settling into one of the chairs with a book from his coat pocket. Dr. Mara Ellington emerged from her office, her gentle presence immediately filling the room. She was a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Anna, I'm Dr. Ellington. Would you like to come in? The therapy room was painted in warm earth tones, with 2 comfortable chairs facing each other near a window with frosted glass. Anna perched on the edge of her seat, her notepad clutched tightly in her hands. First, I want you to know that this is a safe space, Dr. Ellington began, her voice steady and reassuring. We'll move at whatever pace feels comfortable for you. Can you take a deep breath with me? Anna followed the doctor's lead, inhaling slowly and exhaling. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Good. Dr. Ellington smiled. Now, I'd like to try some simple grounding exercises. Can you look around the room and write down 5 things you can see? Anna's pen moved across the paper. Plant, clock, bookshelf, blue pillow, rain starting outside. They continued with similar exercises, Dr. Ellington gently guiding Anna through identifying things she could hear, feel, and smell. The session progressed smoothly, with Anna becoming noticeably more at ease as they worked through basic memory prompts about safe, neutral topics like her work at the bookstore. Then it happened. A shadow fell across the frosted window, someone opening an umbrella outside. The simple silhouette transformed Anna's world into a nightmare. Her body went rigid, the pen clattering from her suddenly lifeless fingers. Her chest heaved with rapid, shallow breaths as uncontrollable tremors racked her frame. "Anna?" Dr. Ellington's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Anna, stay with me. Focus on my voice." But Anna couldn't focus. Her eyes remained fixed on the window, wide with terror. Dr. Ellington quickly moved to her side, then called out, "Mr. Vale, could you please join us?" Damien entered immediately, his face etched with concern. He knelt beside Anna's chair as she fumbled for her fallen pen with shaking hands. When she finally grasped it, she scrawled 2 words that made both Damien and Dr. Ellington exchange worried glances. "He's back." "Who's back, Anna?" Dr. Ellington asked gently. "Can you tell us?" But Anna's hand trembled too violently to write more. Her face had gone ashen, and tears began sliding silently down her cheeks. Dr. Ellington quickly ended the session, giving Anna some breathing exercises to practice and scheduling another appointment for the following week. Damien guided Anna outside, his arm protective around her shoulders as they scanned the street. The man with the umbrella was nowhere to be seen. The rain had already stopped, leaving only wet sidewalks and a heavy sky behind. The drive back to Vale's books was silent except for Anna's gradually steadying breathing. Damien kept glancing at her, concern evident in the tightness around his eyes. When they arrived, he walked her up to the break room. "Rest here as long as you need," he said softly. "I'll be in my office if you need anything." "Anything at all?" Anna nodded, curling up in the worn armchair by the window. Damien watched her for a moment, longer before heading to his office, his mind already racing with possibilities. As soon as his office door closed behind him, Damien opened his laptop and began searching through police records. His publishing connections had given him access to certain databases, and now he put them to use, looking for any information about Anna's childhood trauma. Hours passed, the store closed below, and the sky outside grew dark. Damien's coffee grew cold beside him as he dug deeper and deeper into old case files. Finally, well past midnight, he found it, a 20-year-old case file that made his blood run cold. The double homicide was brutal. A husband and wife murdered in their own home while their 6-year-old daughter watched from a hiding place. The file included a photograph of a small black girl with bright eyes and a sweet smile. Anna, before the trauma stole her voice. The case remained unsolved, marked by a single distinctive detail, a black umbrella left at the scene, which disappeared from evidence storage 3 days later. Damien sat back in his chair, running his hands over his face. The connection was impossible to ignore, Anna's reaction to the umbrella, her message about someone being back. The implications were terrifying. He looked at the photo of young Anna again, his heart aching for the little girl whose world had shattered, and for the woman who still carried that broken world inside her. The clock on his wall ticked past 1 in the morning as Damien stared at the glowing screen, the weight of this discovery settling heavy on his shoulders. Whatever had happened in Anna's past wasn't staying there. It was reaching into the present, casting shadows as dark as the night outside his window. The early morning sun had barely begun to filter through Boston's persistent November fog when Damien unlocked the bookstore's front door. The cafe portion of Vale's books remained dim and quiet, the coffee machines not yet warmed up for the day. He moved through the familiar motions of preparation, grinding beans, heating water, arranging chairs, all while his mind churned over the disturbing discoveries from the night before. Anna arrived precisely at 7 o'clock, just as she had every morning for the past 3 years. Today, however, her usual quiet presence seemed more fragile, like a delicate glass figurine that had already developed hairline cracks. She stood in the doorway for a moment, her dark eyes taking in the empty cafe, before making her way to the corner table where Damien waited with 2 steaming mugs. "Good morning," he said softly, pushing one of the cups toward her. "I made your favorite, vanilla latte with extra foam." Anna's lips curved in a small smile of thanks as she settled into the chair across from him. Her hands, when she reached for the mug, were steady, but Damien noticed how tightly she gripped the ceramic, as if anchoring herself. "Anna," he began carefully, "I did some research last night and I found some information that I think you should know about. Are you ready to hear it?" She met his eyes, and though fear flickered across her face, she gave a determined nod. Damien watched as she pulled out her ever-present notepad and pen, laying them on the table between them like a shield. "The man—" Damien paused, choosing his words with deliberate care. "The man suspected of killing your parents 20 years ago. His name is Carl Denton. He was never convicted because there wasn't enough evidence to make the charges stick." Anna's fingers tightened around her mug, her knuckles growing pale with the pressure. She didn't move to write anything, just waited for him to continue, her face a careful mask. "But there's something else," Damien said, his voice growing softer. "Something I discovered that connects to my own past in a way I never expected." He took a deep breath. "Denton used to work security at one of my father's properties. He wasn't directly employed by our family, but he worked for the company that handled security for several of our estates." The color drained from Anna's face so quickly that Damien worried she might faint again. Her hands began to shake, causing ripples in her coffee. She reached for her pen with trembling fingers and wrote 5 words that made Damien's blood run cold. He had a black umbrella. The simple statement hung between them in the quiet cafe, heavy with 20 years of unspoken terror. Anna's pen moved again across the paper, her usually neat handwriting now jagged with emotion. That night, he carried it even though it wasn't raining. Damien reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. "Anna, I want you to know that you're safe here. I'm going to increase security around the store immediately. We'll install new cameras, upgrade the locks, hire additional evening staff, whatever it takes." She nodded, though the trembling in her hands hadn't subsided. There was something else in her eyes now, not just fear, but a hint of relief, as if finally sharing this burden had loosened its grip on her throat, even just a little. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts as the morning light grew stronger outside. Finally, Anna wrote something new. "Thank you for believing me, for helping me." "Of course," Damien replied without hesitation. "You're not alone anymore." The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and books, but Damien noticed how Anna stayed closer to the front counter than usual, her eyes darting to the windows more frequently. By closing time, he had already made several calls to security companies and arranged for immediate installations. "Are you ready?" he asked Anna as the last customer left. "I'll help you move your things upstairs." They made several trips up the narrow staircase to the studio apartment, carrying boxes and bags of Anna's belongings. The space was small but warm, with large windows overlooking the quiet street below. Damien had made sure it was properly furnished: a comfortable bed, a small dining table, a cozy reading chair by the window. "The security system is already active up here," he explained as he showed her how to use the keypad. "These windows are reinforced, and there's a panic button by the bed that connects directly to police dispatch." Anna nodded, taking everything in with careful attention. She wrote quickly on her pad. "Thank you. I feel safer already." "Good. That's what matters most." Damien moved toward the door. "If you need anything at all, I'm just a phone call away, day or night." After one final check of the locks and security system, Damien headed downstairs. He was exhausted, the weight of responsibility and worry settling heavy on his shoulders. As he reached the bookstore's front door, he paused to lock up, his movements automatic after years of routine. That's when he saw it, a reflection in the darkened glass. Across the street, barely visible through the thickening evening fog, stood a figure holding a black umbrella. Before Damien could turn around for a better look, the figure melted away into the mist, leaving only questions and a creeping sense of dread. The nightmare that had sent Anna into silence 2 decades ago wasn't just a memory anymore. It was here, watching, waiting, as tangible as the fog that wrapped around the quiet Boston street. And somehow, through a twisted thread of fate, Damien's own past was woven into its dark fabric. He stood at the door a moment longer, his eyes scanning the street, but there was nothing more to see. The fog had swallowed everything, including the mysterious figure with the black umbrella. Above him, he could see the warm light from Anna's new apartment window, a beacon in the growing darkness. He prayed it would be enough to keep the shadows at bay. The morning sunlight streamed through the studio windows, painting golden rectangles on Anna's new hardwood floor. She blinked awake slowly, taking a moment to remember where she was. The brick buildings across the street reflected the early light, creating a warm glow that filled her small space with comfort. Anna slipped out of bed, her bare feet quiet on the cool floor. Everything felt different here, safer, more contained. She moved to the kitchenette, filling her electric kettle with fresh water. The familiar ritual of making tea helped ground her in this unfamiliar space. She chose chamomile, watching as the hot water turned golden brown, releasing a soothing aroma that reminded her of quiet mornings. A gentle knock at her door made her jump slightly, but Damien's voice immediately followed. "Anna, it's just me. The security team is here for the final installation." She opened the door to find Damien looking fresh and alert despite the early hour. His presence carried its own kind of safety. Steady, unwavering. He gave her a gentle smile and gestured to 2 technicians waiting in the hallway. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well. This won't take long, but I wanted to make sure you know exactly how everything works." Over the next hour, Damien and the technicians walked Anna through every security feature. They showed her how to arm and disarm the system, demonstrated the window sensors, and carefully explained the panic button installation near her bed. Anna took careful notes, her hand steady as she wrote down codes and procedures. "The panic button connects directly to police dispatch," Damien explained, his voice serious but kind. "One press, and help will be here in minutes." He paused, making sure she met his eyes. "You're not alone anymore, Anna. I want you to really understand that." She nodded, writing quickly on her notepad. "Thank you. I do understand." The morning stretched into afternoon as Anna settled into her familiar routine downstairs. The bookstore hummed with quiet activity, customers browsing shelves, the soft rustle of pages turning, the gentle chime of the register. She moved through the aisles with practiced ease, reshelving returned books and helping customers find their next great read. Throughout the day, she caught glimpses of Damien pretending to browse the shelves. He would pick up a book, flip through it absently, then glance in her direction when he thought she wasn't looking. His concern was touching rather than intrusive, like having a guardian angel in a tailored suit. Mrs. Halloway bustled about the store, her silver hair catching the light as she straightened displays and had chatted with regular customers. Her presence added another layer of comfort to Anna's day. There was something so steadying about the older woman's quiet strength and warm smile. As closing time approached, Mrs. Halloway appeared at Anna's side. "Damien's invited us both up for dinner," she said softly. "I've made my famous vegetable soup. Would you join us, dear?" Anna nodded, surprising herself with how quickly she accepted. The thought of returning to her empty apartment suddenly seemed less appealing, than sharing a meal with these two people who had become her unlikely protectors. Damien's private apartment above the store was larger than Anna had imagined, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable leather furniture. The smell of Mrs. Halloway's soup filled the space, rich and homey. They gathered around a wooden table by the window, where the last rays of sunset painted the sky in soft pinks and purples. Mrs. Halloway served the soup with fresh bread, her movements efficient and maternal. "You know," she began, settling into her chair, "this reminds me of when I first came to work at Vale's Books 25 years ago." Anna leaned forward slightly, pen poised above her notepad, interested in the story. "I had just lost my husband," Mrs. Halloway continued, her voice gentle with memory. "I was scared and lonely, didn't know how I'd manage on my own. But this place," she gestured around them, "it became my sanctuary, and the people here became my family." Damien smiled softly. "My father always said you were the heart of this store. And now look at us." Mrs. Halloway reached over to pat Anna's hand. "God has a way of bringing the right people together at the right time. He builds families in the most unexpected ways." Anna wrote quickly, "Did you ever stop being scared?" Mrs. Halloway considered the question carefully. "The fear didn't disappear overnight, but each day I chose to have faith. Faith in God, faith in good people, faith in myself. And slowly, the fear lost its power." They talked long into the evening, Mrs. Halloway sharing more stories of her life, of the bookstore's history, of times when faith and friendship had overcome darkness. Anna found herself smiling more than she had in years, drawn into the warm circle of conversation even through her written words. When she finally returned to her studio, Anna felt lighter somehow. She sat at her small desk and opened her journal, something she hadn't done in months. Her pen moved across the page with unexpected ease. "Today feels different. For the first time in 20 years, I'm not just surviving, I'm beginning to hope. Mrs. Halloway talks about faith like it's as natural as breathing. Maybe she's right. Maybe there's a reason I ended up here, with these people. For the first time I can imagine a future where the shadows don't win." Anna closed her journal and got ready for bed, the evening's warmth still lingering in her chest. She drifted off to sleep, feeling protected, unaware of the dark figure standing in the alley below. The man's face was hidden in shadow as he watched her window, his presence as silent as Anna herself. After several long moments, he melted away into the darkness, leaving no trace of his vigil. The morning sun hadn't yet risen when Anna woke, her small studio apartment still wrapped in pre-dawn shadows. She dressed quietly, pulling on a warm sweater against the November chill, and made her way downstairs to the bookstore cafe. The wooden steps creaked softly beneath her feet as she descended, each sound familiar and oddly comforting in the empty building. The cafe needed its morning routine, wiping down counters, filling sugar dispensers, checking the coffee machines. Anna moved through these tasks with practiced ease, finding peace in the familiar motions. Through the front windows, she watched the sky slowly brighten from deep blue to pale grey, the street outside coming alive with early commuters. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 7 o'clock. Anna looked up to see Damien entering, 2 paper bags from the local bakery in his hands. His face was pink from the cold, his breath visible in small clouds as he stepped inside. "Good morning," he said warmly, setting the bags on the counter. "I brought breakfast, those cranberry scones you like." He pulled out one of the warm pastries and placed it on a napkin for her. Anna smiled her thanks, writing quickly on her notepad. "The cafe's ready to open." "Perfect timing, then," Damien replied. "Would you mind helping me stock the new shipment while we wait for the morning rush? I thought I might read aloud while we work. Sometimes it helps me catch errors in the reprints." Anna nodded, following him to the back room where boxes of books waited. They fell into an easy rhythm, Damien opening boxes while Anna sorted the books by section. After a few minutes, he pulled out one of his earlier novels, Midnight Gardens, and began to read as they worked. His voice was steady and soothing, bringing the words to life in the quiet space. Anna found herself mouthing along silently as he read, her lips forming the shapes of words she couldn't voice. She didn't realize she was doing it until she caught his gentle smile. But for once, she didn't feel self-conscious about it. Later that morning, Anna made her way to Dr. Ellington's office for her therapy session. The waiting room was peaceful, with soft music playing and warm light filtering through gauzy curtains. When the doctor called her in, Anna felt unusually calm. "I heard you had a good week?" Dr. Ellington said, settling into her chair. "Would you like to try something new today?" Anna nodded, though her hands twisted nervously in her lap. "We're going to practice making simple sounds," Dr. Ellington explained. "Just vowels at first, like this. Ah." She demonstrated, keeping her voice soft and encouraging. "Would you try that with me?" Anna's throat felt tight, her chest constricting with familiar anxiety. But she thought of Damien reading that morning, of how natural it had felt to shape the words silently. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and tried. The sound was barely there, more breath than voice, but it was unmistakably a hum. Anna's eyes flew open in surprise, and Dr. Ellington beamed at her. "That's wonderful, Anna. That's exactly right. Would you like to try again?" They spent the rest of the session working on that simple sound, Anna growing slightly more confident with each attempt. When they finished, Dr. Ellington wrote a note in her file. "First vocalization in 20 years. Significant breakthrough." Damien was waiting in the lobby, pretending to read a magazine, but clearly anxious to hear how it went. Anna's hands shook slightly as she wrote on her notepad. "I made a sound." His face lit up with pride and joy. "This calls for a celebration," he declared, leading her to the cafe next door. He bought her favorite blueberry muffin and wrote on a napkin, "I'm proud of you." The rest of the workday passed peacefully. Anna felt lighter somehow, as though something inside her had begun to unlock. As evening approached, Mrs. Halloway invited her to share tea in the cafe after closing. They sat at a corner table, steam rising from their cups. Mrs. Halloway stirred honey into her tea, her movements deliberate and graceful. "You know," she began, "grief is a funny thing. It can lock us away from the world, make us feel so terribly alone. But God has a way of bringing the right people into our lives just when we need them most." Anna wrote carefully, "I feel safe here." Mrs. Halloway reached across the table and squeezed her hand, her eyes warm with understanding. "You are safe here, dear. You're part of our family now." As they prepared to leave, Anna did one final walk-through of the store, checking that everything was in order. She paused in the fiction section, something catching her eye. The display of new releases seemed slightly off, books pushed back at an odd angle, as though someone had brushed against them after they'd been straightened for closing. She touched Damien's arm, pointing to the display. He examined it briefly and shrugged. "Probably just a customer earlier. We were busy this afternoon." But Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She studied the books again, trying to understand why they bothered her so much. The spines were aligned wrong, yes, but there was something else. A faint scuff mark on the shelf that hadn't been there before, as though someone had stood there, watching through the gaps between books. Her hands trembled as she wrote, "Are you sure it was a customer?" Damien read her note and looked at the display again, more carefully this time. "The security system was on all night, and we've been here all day. No one could have gotten in without us knowing." He spoke confidently, but Anna noticed him glancing toward the shadows between the shelves, as though suddenly aware of all the places someone could hide in a bookstore after dark. 2 days passed in relative calm at Vale's Books. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting warm patterns across the wooden floors as customers browsed the shelves. Anna found comfort in the routine, straightening displays, helping readers find their next adventure, and sharing quiet smiles with Mrs. Halloway. Damien sat in his office, reviewing manuscripts when his phone buzzed. The number belonged to Mason Drew, the private investigator he'd hired to look into Carl Denton's whereabouts. His stomach tightened as he answered. "Mr. Vale." Mason's voice was low and serious. "I've confirmed what you suspected. Denton was released from prison 2 months ago. He's been spotted around Boston's waterfront district multiple times in the past week." Damien's hand tightened on the phone. "How close?" "Close enough to be concerning. He's staying at a motel near the harbor. My sources say he's been asking questions about local bookstores." "Keep watching him." Damien ordered. "I want to know the moment he makes any suspicious moves." After hanging up, Damien stood at his office window, watching Anna below as she worked with Mrs. Halloway. They were conducting inventory, Mrs. Halloway calling out titles while Anna checked them off on her clipboard. The elderly woman occasionally touched Anna's shoulder, or smiled warmly at her, and Damien could see how Anna had begun to relax in her presence. He decided not to tell Anna about Denton yet. She was finally finding her footing, making progress in therapy. The knowledge that her parents' killer was so close might shatter her fragile sense of security. Throughout the afternoon, Anna and Mrs. Halloway worked their way through the store's extensive inventory. Mrs. Halloway's gentle humor made the tedious task almost enjoyable. "Oh my," Mrs. Halloway chuckled, pulling out a dusty romance novel. "I remember when these bodice rippers were all the rage. The covers alone could make a person blush." Anna's shoulders shook with silent laughter as she marked the book on her list. When evening came, Anna retreated to her studio apartment above the store. She'd set up an easel by the window, where the last rays of sunlight illuminated her canvas. Painting had become her refuge, a way to express what her voice could not. Tonight, the images flowed freely from her brush. Dark clouds, rain-slicked streets, the ghostly shape of a man holding an umbrella. As she painted, memories surfaced like bubbles in still water. She remembered running, her small feet splashing through puddles, the sound of her mother's voice calling her name. Then silence, terrible silence. Her hands trembled as she added more details. A little girl in a yellow raincoat, frozen in mid-stride. The painting captured the moment before everything changed, when she was still just a child without knowledge of the darkness in the world. A gentle knock at her door startled her from her memories. "Anna, it's Damien. May I come in?" She wiped her tears and opened the door. Damien stepped inside, his eyes immediately drawn to the painting. "Is this you?" he asked softly, studying the small figure in the yellow raincoat. Anna nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. The painting said what she couldn't. The fear, the loss, the years of silence that followed. Damien placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore, Anna. Whatever happened in the past, whatever comes next, you don't have to face it by yourself. I promise you that." His words were simple but sincere, and Anna felt their truth deep in her heart. She picked up her notepad and wrote, "Thank you for everything." "I should get my coat from downstairs," Damien said after a while. "Try to get some rest, okay?" Anna nodded, turning back to her painting as he left. Downstairs, Damien headed to his office, but stopped short when he noticed something wrong. The back door, which he distinctly remembered locking earlier, stood slightly ajar. A chill ran down his spine as he crossed the room. He checked the door carefully. No signs of forced entry, but the lock didn't quite catch properly when he tested it. He shut it firmly and reset the security system, his mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. Before leaving, Damien made 2 complete circuits of the store, checking every aisle, every shadow. He tested all the windows and doors again, making sure everything was secure. But as he walked to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that danger was drawing closer, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The click of his car door locking echoed in the empty street. Somewhere in the darkness, a church bell tolled 9 times, its sound muffled by the gathering fog. The evening settled over Vale's books like a heavy blanket, wrapping the old building in shadows and silence. Outside, streetlights cast warm pools of light on the empty sidewalks, while a gentle drizzle tapped against the windows. Inside his second-floor office, Damien Vale sat in his leather armchair, a manuscript open on his lap, waiting for Anna to arrive. When she appeared in the doorway, he noticed how tired she looked. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of restless nights spent processing memories she'd rather forget. Still, she managed a small smile as she settled into the chair across from him. "I thought we might try something different tonight," Damien said softly, adjusting the desk lamp to create a cozy atmosphere. "I've been working on a new chapter, and I'd appreciate your thoughts." Anna nodded, pulling her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The office felt safe, with its walls of books and the familiar scent of old paper and leather bindings. Family photos lined Damien's desk, his late wife's smile frozen in time, reminding Anna of other smiles lost to memory. Damien cleared his throat and began reading. His voice was gentle, measured, filling the room with words that painted pictures of hope and healing. The passage described a young woman much like Anna, someone who had lost her voice to trauma but was slowly finding her way back to herself. Sarah stood at the edge of the cliff. He read, not to jump, but to prove she could face her fears. The wind whipped her hair, carrying away the silence that had bound her for so long. As he continued reading, Anna's gaze dropped to the floor. Her hands began to tremble in her lap, and her breathing became shallow. The words seemed to unlock something deep inside her, something she'd kept buried for 20 years. Damien was midway through a sentence when it happened. Mama said to run, but I froze. The whisper was so faint he almost missed it, but its impact hit him like a physical blow. He stopped reading, the manuscript forgotten in his hands. Anna's voice, unused for so many years, had emerged like a ghost from the past. Tears welled in her eyes as memories crashed over her with devastating clarity. Her whole body shook with the force of them. The rain, the screams, her mother's final words, the paralysis of terror that had sealed her voice away. Damien set aside the manuscript and knelt beside her chair, taking her trembling hands in his. Her skin felt ice-cold, and he could feel her pulse racing beneath his fingers. "Anna," he said firmly but gently. "Listen to me. You were just a child, a little girl faced with unimaginable horror. Freezing was a natural response. It doesn't make you weak or cowardly." She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "You survived," he continued, squeezing her hands. "You're here now, and you're not that helpless child anymore. You're strong, braver than you know, and you're not alone." Minutes passed as Anna struggled to regain her composure. Damien remained kneeling beside her, offering silent support until her breathing steadied and her tears slowed. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red-rimmed but clearer. She reached for her notepad with shaking hands and wrote, "I've never told anyone that before." "Thank you for trusting me," Damien replied softly. "That's enough for tonight. You should try to get some rest." Anna nodded, exhausted by the emotional breakthrough. As she stood to leave, her legs were unsteady, and Damien kept a supportive hand near her elbow as they walked to the door. "I'll be down here finishing some paperwork if you need anything," he assured her. "Try to sleep if you can." After making sure Anna made it safely to her studio apartment, Damien returned to his office. He sat at his desk, still processing what had happened. Anna's whispered words played over and over in his mind, not just the content, but the raw pain in her voice, as if the 20 years between then and now had vanished in an instant. He tried to focus on his work, but his thoughts kept returning to Anna. The breakthrough was significant, speaking for the first time in decades, but he worried about the emotional toll it might take. He made a mental note to call Dr. Ellington in the morning to discuss this development. Hours passed as Damien worked through his paperwork, the steady scratch of his pen providing a rhythm to his thoughts. Finally, close to midnight, he decided to call it a night. He gathered his things and began his nightly routine of checking the store's security. Starting upstairs, he made sure all windows were locked and the security system was armed. He worked his way methodically down to the main floor, checking each section of the store. The familiar routine usually brought him comfort, but tonight something felt off. As he approached the front of the store to leave, he noticed something that made his heart sink. There, near the back hallway, were fresh, muddy footprints on the hardwood floor. They led in from the outside, where the alarm should have prevented any entry. Damien stared at the prints, his mind racing. The security system hadn't been triggered. The doors had been locked. Yet somehow, someone had managed to get inside. Someone who knew how to bypass their precautions. Someone who might still be watching. The store's shadows suddenly seemed darker, more threatening. The safety they'd worked so hard to create felt like an illusion, as fragile as the silence Anna had finally broken. The muddy footprints left Damien deeply unsettled. He hurried to the security office, a small room tucked away behind the main counter. The wall of monitors cast a blue glow across his worried face as he began reviewing the footage from every camera in the store. Hours ticked by as he meticulously combed through the recordings. Nothing. No sign of an intruder. No breach of the alarm system. The muddy prints seemed to have materialized out of nowhere, defying both logic and technology. "This isn't possible," he muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. He rewound the footage again, checking different angles, different time stamps. Still nothing. The clock on the wall showed 11:30 in the evening. Exhaustion pulled at him, making his thoughts fuzzy. He'd been staring at screens for hours, and his eyes burned from the effort. Perhaps he was being overly paranoid. Maybe the prints were from earlier in the day, though he couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't been there before. Sighing heavily, he switched off the monitors and gathered his belongings. One last check on Anna, he decided, then he could finally head home. But as he turned to leave his office, something stopped him cold in the doorway. There, placed precisely in the center of his desk, was a black umbrella. Water dripped steadily from its folds, forming a dark puddle on the polished wood. Beneath it lay a single sheet of paper. Damien's hands trembled as he reached for the paper. The moment he saw what it was, his blood turned to ice. A scanned childhood drawing, clearly done by a young hand, showed stick figures in the rain. One figure held what looked like a black umbrella. Red crayon marks splashed across the scene like blood. It was Anna's drawing, a drawing that had never been released to the public. A drawing that should have been sealed away in a police evidence file for 20 years, dear God. Damien whispered, his voice hoarse. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Carl Denton hadn't just been inside the store, he'd been inside this very office. Panic surged through him as his thoughts flew to Anna. He dropped the drawing and ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. His footsteps echoed loudly in the empty stairwell as he raced toward her studio apartment. "Anna!" he called out as he reached her floor. No answer. The hallway stretched before him, seeming longer than usual in the dim light. At the end, Anna's door stood open. The overhead light flickered erratically, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls. Damien's heart pounded against his ribs as he approached. "Anna, are you there?" The studio was empty. Her bed was unmade, covers thrown back as if she'd left in a hurry. Her shoes, the comfortable ones she always wore around the apartment, were missing. On her small desk, her journal lay open, its pages covered in frantic, chaotic lines that spoke of terror and desperation. No. Damien muttered, pulling his phone from his pocket with shaking hands. As he dialed 911, he heard it, the soft patter of rain beginning outside. Just like the night this all began. Just like the night Anna's parents were murdered. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a kidnapping, Damien said, his voice tight with fear. At Vale's Books on Beacon Street. Please hurry. The man who killed her parents 20 years ago, he's taken her again. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows like fingers tapping on glass. Somewhere in the darkness of Boston, Anna was out there, and so was the man with the black umbrella. Sir, can you provide more details about the victim? Damien gripped the phone tighter, staring at the empty bed, the scattered journal pages, the evidence of a life suddenly interrupted. Her name is Anna Brooks. She's 26 years old. His voice caught. She only just spoke again today for the first time in 20 years. Please, you have to find her. The wail of police sirens pierced the rainy night as patrol cars converged on Vale's Books, their red and blue lights painting the wet streets in alternating colors. Officers poured into the building, their boots squeaking against the hardwood floors as Detective Laura Keeley took charge of the scene. "Show me everything," she commanded, following Damien back to his office. Her experienced eyes swept over the black umbrella, still dripping onto his desk, and the child's drawing beneath it. "This was here when I came to leave," Damien explained, his voice rough with worry. "The drawing. It's from the original case file. Anna drew it the night her parents were murdered. There's no way anyone but the killer could have access to it." Detective Keeley pulled on latex gloves and carefully lifted the umbrella. "And you're certain about the suspect? Carl Denton?" "Yes, he worked security for my father's estate years ago. He was never convicted of Anna's parents' murder, but she recognized him recently. She saw him watching her." Damien ran his hands through his hair, pacing. "I hired extra security, installed new alarms, but somehow he still got in. Officers photographed everything while crime scene technicians dusted for fingerprints. The muddy footprints in the back hallway were carefully documented and measured." "I need to help search for her," Damien insisted, grabbing his coat. "She's out there somewhere in this rain." Detective Keeley studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Stay with Officer Martinez. We'll coordinate a grid search of the surrounding area." They moved into the wet darkness, flashlight beams cutting through the rain. Teams of officers spread out, checking every alley, doorway, and shadow. Damien's shoes splashed through puddles as he and Officer Martinez systematically worked their way down side streets, calling Anna's name. They questioned late-night workers at nearby businesses, showing Anna's photo. A tired barista remembered seeing someone matching her description hurrying past the cafe window earlier, but couldn't be certain of the time. A security guard at the parking garage hadn't seen anything unusual. The search expanded to bus stops and subway stations. Transit police reviewed security footage while patrol cars circled wider and wider through the neighborhoods. But as the hours crawled by, they found no trace of Anna or her kidnapper. Dawn broke gray and misty over Boston. The rain had settled into a fine drizzle that beaded on Damien's coat as he finally returned to the bookstore. His clothes were soaked, his body exhausted, but his mind refused to rest. He climbed the stairs to Anna's studio apartment, where crime scene technicians had finished processing the scene. Yellow evidence markers dotted the floor near her desk, where they'd found signs of a struggle, a knocked-over chair, scattered papers. Damien sank onto the edge of her unmade bed, picking up her journal from where it lay on the nightstand. The police had photographed it, but left it in place. With trembling fingers, he opened it, needing to feel some connection to her, to understand what she'd been thinking in the days before her abduction. The pages were filled with her neat handwriting, occasionally giving way to sketches in the margins. He began to read. "First night in my new home. The sounds are different here. Creaking floors, rustling pages from the bookstore below. But I feel safer than I have in years. Damien promised to protect me. I want to believe him." A few pages later. "The memories are coming back stronger now. Sometimes I see shadows that remind me of that night. But then I hear Mrs. Halloway humming hymns while she works, or Damien reading aloud from his books, and the shadows retreat. Had another therapy session today. Dr. Ellington says I'm making progress. Made sounds today, actual sounds. Damien bought me a blueberry muffin to celebrate. His kindness makes me want to be brave." Damien's vision blurred with tears as he turned to one of the final entries, dated just 2 days ago. "The nightmares are getting worse. I keep seeing the boathouse where I hid that night, hearing the water lapping against the dock. The smell of fish and salt air. I drew it to get it out of my head. But the memory won't leave me alone." He sat up straighter, studying the sketch beside the entry. It showed a small, weathered structure on pilings over water, with distinctive crossed beams supporting the roof. He had assumed it was symbolic when she'd first shown him her artwork. But now, his hands shaking, Damien pulled out his phone and dialed Mason Drew, his private investigator. "Mason, I need you to find something for me right now. Every abandoned or unused boathouse within 10 miles of Boston Harbor. Focus on ones that would have been active 20 years ago, near where Anna's parents were killed." "That's a lot of ground to cover," Mason replied, "but I'll get my team on it immediately." "Work fast," Damien ordered, staring at Anna's sketch. "And send me the locations as you find them. I don't care if I have to check every single one myself. I'm not stopping until we find her." He ended the call and stood, his exhaustion forgotten as purpose filled him. Somewhere in this city, probably near the water, Anna was being held by the monster from her past. But this time, she wasn't a helpless child. And this time, she wasn't alone. Anna's head throbbed as consciousness slowly returned. The first thing she noticed was the musty smell, salt water mixed with rotting wood and mildew. Her eyes fluttered open to dim light filtering through grimy windows. She lay on rough wooden planks, her wrists loosely bound with scratchy rope. The familiar scent of brine transported her back 20 years, to happier times when her parents would take her to the docks on sunny afternoons. They'd watch boats come and go while eating ice cream cones, her father pointing out different types of vessels, her mother laughing at his made-up sailor stories. But this was no happy memory. This boathouse held only darkness and fear. Water lapped gently against the pilings beneath the floor, creating an eerie rhythm in the shadows. Anna's heart pounded as she took in her surroundings. Stacked crates, coiled ropes, old fishing gear hanging from rusty hooks. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling, casting weak yellow light that barely reached the corners. Movement caught her eye. A figure stood near the door, his back to her. Even after 2 decades, she knew that silhouette. Carl Denton. The man who had destroyed her childhood, stolen her voice, murdered her parents. He was older now, his hair grayed, his shoulders slightly stooped, but unmistakably the same person who had haunted her nightmares. He turned, sensing she was awake. His face held the same cold calculation she remembered, like a predator sizing up prey. "Finally joining us, little Anna?" His voice was rough, amused. You've grown up, but those eyes, still just as wide and frightened as that night? He walked toward her, boots heavy on the wooden planks. Anna's whole body began to tremble, her breath coming in short gasps. To her horror, sound started escaping her throat, tiny, terrified whispers she couldn't control. Look at that, Denton said, crouching beside her. Finally found your voice, did you? Bad timing. He shook his head with mock sympathy. You saw too much back then, you know. Should have stayed silent like a good girl. But now, he gestured around the boathouse. Now you've gotten yourself mixed up with that rich writer, started remembering things, talking to doctors, making trouble. Anna's whispers grew more frantic, fragments of words tumbling out unbidden. Her body wanted to curl into itself, to become small and invisible like she had that night 20 years ago. But something deep inside her stirred, a spark of resistance. Dr. Ellington's calm voice echoed in her mind. When panic rises, focus on your breath, ground yourself in the present moment. You are not that helpless child anymore. Anna forced herself to take slower breaths, counting them like she'd practiced in therapy. In for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. The trembling in her limbs began to steady. She was still afraid, terrified, but the overwhelming panic started to recede just enough for her to think. Denton's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, scowling at the screen. Don't go anywhere. He sneered, walking toward the door. Need to take this call. Can't have anyone hearing you whisper. As soon as he stepped outside, Anna twisted her body, using her elbow to reach the top of her boot. Her fingers brushed her phone, still hidden where she'd instinctively shoved it when Denton had grabbed her. With trembling hands, she managed to activate the emergency app Damien had installed last week, a special program designed to help with her therapy by recording and transcribing her attempts at speech. But now it could do more than that. If she could just make enough sound for it to register, it would send her location to Damien and the police. She heard Denton's muffled voice outside, growing agitated. Taking a deep breath, Anna focused all her energy on forming words. Help! I'm here! The whisper was faint, barely audible even to her own ears, but on the phone's screen she saw the words appear, followed by a tiny green light indicating successful transmission. Footsteps approached the door. Anna quickly slid the phone back into her boot, praying the signal had gone through. As Denton re-entered, she closed her eyes, pretending to be lost in fear again. But inside, that spark of resistance grew stronger. She wasn't alone anymore. People were looking for her. All she had to do was survive until help arrived. The water continued its gentle lapping beneath the boathouse, marking time with each small wave. Anna focused on that rhythm, using it to stay grounded as she had learned in therapy. In her mind, she whispered a prayer, not of fear this time, but of hope. Dawn barely touched the horizon when Damien's phone buzzed on his desk. He hadn't slept, spending the night examining maps of the waterfront and coordinating with his private investigator, Mason Drew. The notification made his heart skip. Anna's emergency speech therapy app had activated, sending coordinates and 2 whispered words. Help, I'm here. Mason! Damien called out to the PI in the next room. We've got her location. His fingers trembled as he forwarded the coordinates to the police. The location matched perfectly with one of the abandoned boathouses they'd identified, the same one from Anna's journal sketch. Mason appeared in the doorway, car keys already in hand. Let's go. Police are 3 minutes out. They raced down the bookstore stairs and into Mason's car. The streets were nearly empty in the early morning light, making their sprint toward the harbor easier. A light rain began to fall, drops hitting the windshield in a familiar pattern that made Damien's stomach clench with worry. She's strong, Mason said, sensing Damien's anxiety. She survived 20 years carrying this trauma. She'll hold on for 20 more minutes. Damien nodded, watching police cars with silent sirens converging on the waterfront from different directions. The rain intensified slightly, creating a misty curtain over the harbour. Through it, Damien could make out the shape of the old boathouse, weather-beaten wood, rust-streaked roof, exactly as Anna had drawn it. Mason parked behind a warehouse, out of sight. They could see police officers taking positions around the building, moving with practiced silence. The harbour water lapped quietly against the pilings, creating an eerie calm before the storm. Inside the boathouse, Anna held perfectly still as Denton paced near the door. Her heart thundered in her chest when he suddenly stopped, head cocked to one side. She prayed he hadn't noticed anything unusual, but her hope crumbled when his face twisted with rage. "You moved!" he snarled, stalking toward her. "While I was outside, you moved!" His eyes darted around the room, searching for evidence of what she might have done. Anna forced herself to stay calm, remembering Dr. Ellington's breathing exercises. In for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. She could hear faint sounds outside now, the crunch of gravel, whispered commands, the subtle shift of bodies taking position. Denton grabbed her arm roughly, yanking her to her feet. "What did you do?" he demanded, shaking her. "What did you—" A loud, authoritative knock crashed against the door, cutting him off. "Police! Open up!" Panic flashed across Denton's face. His grip on Anna's arm tightened painfully as he dragged her toward the back of the boathouse. "Not again," he muttered. "Not going back inside, not because of you." Anna stumbled as he pulled her, her boots scraping against the wooden floor. She could hear more movement outside, voices calling out commands. Denton reached the back door, fumbling with the latch while keeping his hold on her. The front door exploded inward with a tremendous crash. "Anna!" Damien's voice rang out, filled with desperate concern. But Denton had already yanked open the back door, pulling Anna with him into the rain. The last thing she saw was Damien's figure rushing through the splintered doorway, his face etched with determination as Denton dragged her around the corner of the boathouse and out of sight. The sound of waves grew louder, mixing with the increasing rain and shouts of pursuit. Anna's world narrowed to the painful grip on her arm, the slip of wet wood beneath her feet, and the prayer that help would reach her before Denton could disappear into the maze of waterfront buildings with her again. Rain pelted the wooden planks of the dock as Denton dragged Anna toward a small motorboat, bobbing against its moorings. The harbour water churned darkly beneath them, waves slapping against the pilings in an angry rhythm. Anna's feet slipped on the wet boards as he yanked her forward, his fingers digging painfully into her arm. "Move!" he growled, glancing frantically over his shoulder at the sounds of pursuit. The boat rocked invitingly, offering him a chance at escape across the dark water. Behind them, Damien's voice carried over the storm. "All units, flank the pier! Don't let him reach that boat!" Police officers fanned out along the waterfront, their flashlight beams cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. Anna's heart pounded as Denton pulled her closer to the edge. 20 years of silence pressed against her throat, a familiar prison of fear. But something else stirred beneath that fear now, a spark of defiance that had been growing stronger with each gentle conversation in the bookstore, each therapy session, each moment of safety she'd found in her new life. The wooden planks grew slicker as the rain intensified. Denton's shoes squeaked against the wet surface as he made a final lunge toward the boat. In that crucial moment, Anna's foot slid on a patch of rain-slick wood. She stumbled, throwing off Denton's balance. His grip loosened for just a split second as he fought to stay upright. It was all she needed. Deep inside Anna's chest, 2 decades of stored words gathered force. All the things she'd wanted to say, all the terror she'd held inside, all the strength she'd built in silence. It all crystallized into a single, powerful moment of courage. She drew in a deep breath and did what had seemed impossible for 20 years. She shouted, "Damien, here!" Her voice rang out clear and strong, slicing through the storm like lightning. The sound startled even her, raw and powerful, alive with everything she'd kept locked away. The shout echoed across the harbor, bouncing off warehouse walls and dancing across the dark water. Damien, already sprinting toward them, surged forward at the sound of her voice. His feet flew across the wet boards as Denton tried to regain his grip on Anna. But it was too late. Damien's shoulder connected with Denton's midsection in a perfect tackle, sending both men crashing to the dock. Anna stumbled backward, catching herself against a piling as the two men grappled on the wet wood. Police officers converged on them instantly, their boots thundering against the dock. Strong hands pulled Denton away from Damien, forcing the struggling man onto his stomach. The metallic click of handcuffs cut through the sound of rain and waves. "You're under arrest," an officer announced firmly, securing the cuffs around Denton's wrists. "Carl Denton, you have the right to remain silent." As two officers pulled Denton to his feet, Damien scrambled up and rushed to Anna. His arms encircled her shaking form, drawing her close against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding through his rain-soaked coat. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair, one hand cradling the back of her head protectively. "You're safe now. I've got you." He repeated the words like a prayer, rocking her gently as she pressed her face into the wet fabric of his coat. Anna's tears mixed with the rain, as deep, racking sobs tore from her throat. But these weren't just tears of fear or relief. They were tears of liberation. Each sob carried with it the sound of her voice, trembling but undeniably present. Words bubbled up from places long sealed away, tentative but growing stronger with each breath. "Safe," she whispered against his chest, testing the feel of the word on her tongue. "Safe." Damien's arms tightened around her. "Yes," he assured her, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now. He can never hurt you again." The rain continued to fall around them, but its rhythm had changed. No longer threatening, it seemed to wash away the last traces of her long silence. Each drop carried away a fragment of her fear, leaving behind something new and fragile, but undeniably strong. Her voice, finally free after 20 years of captivity. Officers led Denton away across the dock, his angry protests fading into the storm. But Anna barely heard him. All she could focus on was the steady beat of Damien's heart against her ear, the gentle pressure of his arms around her, and the extraordinary sensation of her own voice, raw and real, humming in her throat as she cried. "You're safe now," Damien repeated softly, sheltering her from the rain. "I've got you. You're safe." And there on the rain-washed dock, held secure in Damien's embrace, Anna let herself believe it. Her voice, so long silenced by trauma, trembled with life in her throat, weak and uncertain, but awakening more with each passing moment. Like a bird testing its wings after a long winter, her words began to stir, ready at last to take flight. The fluorescent lights of Boston General Hospital cast a soft glow across Anna's room as afternoon sunlight filtered through the window blinds. The steady beep of monitors provided a rhythmic backdrop as she rested in the adjustable bed, her body exhausted, but her spirit lighter than it had been in 20 years. Damien hadn't left her side since they arrived, his hand providing constant reassurance through gentle squeezes. The white hospital walls seemed less stark with him there, his presence anchoring her to this new reality where her voice was finally free. "Water," Anna whispered, testing the word carefully. Damien immediately reached for the plastic cup on the bedside table. "Here you are," he said softly, helping her take small sips. "Thank you," she managed, her voice rough but growing steadier with each attempt. Every word felt like a small victory, a piece of herself returning home. The door opened quietly as Dr. Sarah Chen entered with a clipboard. "Good news, Miss Brooks. All your tests have come back normal. No physical injuries beyond some minor bruising on your wrists." She smiled warmly. "Your voice will likely be sore for a few days from sudden use, but there's no permanent damage." Anna nodded, squeezing Damien's hand. "When can I—" She paused, gathering her words. "Go home. We'll discharge you this evening, as long as you promise to rest." Dr. Chen replied. A soft knock at the door drew their attention. Mrs. Halloway stood in the doorway, her arms full of bright yellow daisies and white lilies. Her eyes welled with tears as she hurried to Anna's bedside. "Oh, my dear girl." Mrs. Halloway's voice quavered as she set the flowers down and gently embraced Anna. "We've been so worried. The whole store has been praying for you." "Mrs. Halloway," Anna whispered, her own eyes filling with tears as she breathed in the familiar scent of vanilla and tea that always seemed to surround the elderly woman. "Listen to you." Mrs. Halloway pulled back, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Speaking. It's like hearing an angel." Before Anna could respond, Detective Laura Keeley appeared in the doorway, her expression professional but kind. "Miss Brooks, if you're feeling up to it, we'd like to take your statement, but we can wait if you need more time." Anna straightened slightly in the bed, her hand still firmly in Damien's. "I can talk now," she said quietly but clearly. Detective Keeley pulled up a chair while Mrs. Halloway excused herself to get coffee. The detective removed a small recorder from her pocket. "Take your time, Miss Brooks. Start wherever you feel comfortable." Anna took a deep breath, her voice emerging stronger than before. "I was 6 years old," she began. "It was raining that night, like yesterday. My parents were working late at their accounting firm." Her voice trembled, but didn't stop as she described that terrible night for the first time aloud. The sound of breaking glass, her mother pushing her into a closet, Denton's shadow moving through their home. She spoke of watching through the slats as he murdered her parents, of his black umbrella dripping on their carpet, of how fear had frozen her voice in her throat that night, and for 20 years after. Damien's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand as she spoke, offering silent support as she described the years of silence that followed, the terror that had gripped her when she recognized Denton outside the bookstore, and finally, the events in the boathouse. When she finished, Detective Keeley turned off the recorder. "You're incredibly brave, Miss Brooks. This testimony, combined with the evidence we've gathered, will ensure Denton faces justice this time." Later that afternoon, Detective Keeley returned with news that made Anna's heart soar. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Denton had confessed to everything. He would never threaten her again. As evening approached, Anna changed into fresh clothes Mrs. Halloway had brought from her apartment. Damien waited outside while a nurse reviewed her discharge instructions, then wheeled her to his car despite her insistence she could walk. The drive back to Vale's Books was quiet, but peaceful. As they turned onto their street, Anna gasped softly. The storefront glowed with warmth, and through the windows she could see familiar faces gathered inside. Her co-workers, regular customers, even the barista from the cafe next door. "They all wanted to welcome you home," Damien explained softly as he helped her from the car. Inside, Anna was surrounded by gentle hugs, words of support, and tears of joy. Someone had hung a banner that read, "Welcome home, Anna," across the register. Mrs. Halloway had organized a spread of cookies and tea in the reading nook. For an hour, Anna sat among these people who had become her family, speaking quiet thank yous and accepting their care. Her voice grew stronger with each interaction, though it still felt strange to hear words where there had been only silence before. As the impromptu celebration wound down and the last well-wishers departed, Damien walked Anna up to her studio apartment. The space felt different now, no longer a hiding place, but truly home. Through her windows, city lights twinkled against the darkening sky like earthbound stars. They sat together on her small sofa, comfortable in the quiet that had once been her only voice. Finally, Anna turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said softly but clearly, "for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Her hand found his, just as it had in the hospital. "For seeing me when I was invisible." Damien's smile was gentle as he squeezed her fingers. "You were never invisible, Anna. You were always extraordinary." He paused, then added, "Actually, I've started rewriting my manuscript." Anna tilted her head questioningly. "The heroine. She's different now," he explained. "Braver, stronger, more like you." His eyes met hers. "Your courage, it changed everything." Anna smiled, her free hand touching her throat where her voice now lived again, no longer caged by fear, but free to soar. The city lights sparkled behind them, witnesses to this moment of quiet triumph, this new chapter beginning. The mid-morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Vale's books, casting warm patterns across the hardwood floors. Anna stood at the front counter, carefully writing price tags for a new shipment of novels. Her hands moved steadily now, without the tremors that had plagued her for so many years. "Would you mind helping me find the new mystery section?" a customer asked, approaching the counter. "Of course," Anna replied with a gentle smile, her voice clear and steady. "It's right this way." As she guided the woman through the store, Anna caught snippets of whispered conversations between browsing customers. "That's her, the one from the news. Such an incredible story." She no longer minded the attention. Each day brought new strength, new words, new reasons to keep speaking. In Dr. Ellington's office 3 times a week, Anna practiced speech exercises that grew more challenging and rewarding. They worked through tongue twisters, read poetry aloud, and discussed the emotions that had kept her silent for so long. The therapist marveled at her progress, noting how Anna's voice grew stronger and more confident with each session. Upstairs in Damien's office, mornings took on a new rhythm. They sat across from each other at his desk, laptops open, crafting the story that had brought them together. Damien had insisted that Anna's perspective was essential to telling it properly. "Your experience, your journey, it's the heart of this story," he had told her when first proposing the collaboration. "Will you help me write it?" Now they worked side by side, Anna's quiet determination complementing Damien's storytelling expertise. Sometimes they would spend hours discussing a single scene, ensuring every emotion rang true. Other times they found themselves sharing memories and laughing together, the sound of Anna's laughter filling the room like music. Mrs. Halloway often brought them tea and cookies, beaming at the sight of them working together. "You two are going to create something beautiful," she would say, patting Anna's shoulder affectionately. The bookstore itself had become a beacon of hope for the community. People came not just for books, but to witness the miracle of healing that had taken place within its walls. Anna found herself greeting regular customers by name, engaging in brief conversations that grew longer and more natural with each passing day. On this particular Sunday afternoon, Anna stood before a small gathering at the Boston Literary Foundation's annual charity event. Damien had sponsored the event for years, but this time felt different. The room was filled with familiar faces, bookstore regulars, fellow employees, even Detective Keeley had come to show support. Anna's hands trembled slightly as she approached the podium, but her voice remained steady as she began to speak. 2 months ago, I couldn't say a single word, she began, her gaze finding Damien's encouraging smile in the front row. Fear had stolen my voice when I was just 6 years old, and I believed it was gone forever. The room fell silent as she continued, sharing her journey from silence to speech, from terror to triumph. But healing isn't just about finding your voice, she said softly. It's about finding people who listen even when you can't speak. It's about discovering that hope exists even in the darkest places. As she spoke, Anna saw tears in many eyes, including Mrs. Halloway's. But it was Damien's expression that touched her most deeply, pride and joy radiating from his face as he watched her stand tall and speak her truth. After the applause faded and the last well-wishers had departed, Anna and Damien walked back to the bookstore together. The late afternoon sun painted the brick buildings in shades of gold, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of approaching spring. They paused outside the store's familiar entrance, where everything had begun that stormy November night. Anna turned to face Damien, their hands naturally finding each other's. "You heard my voice before I ever did," she said softly, the words carrying all the gratitude her heart held. Damien's eyes softened as he squeezed her hand gently. "And I'll cherish it for the rest of my life," he replied, his voice full of tenderness. Together they turned toward the bookstore's entrance. The bell chimed above them as they stepped inside, leaving behind the shadows of fear and silence. Through the windows, sunlight streamed in, illuminating their path forward, a future bright with possibility, purpose, and the beautiful sound of a voice reclaimed. The afternoon light caught the gold lettering on the window, Vale's Books. But now it was more than just a bookstore. It was a testament to healing, to second chances, and to the power of being truly heard. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.